I had this crazy dream that the Phillies are in the World Series. Could that be right?
It's amazing.
Unbelievable, right?
It is amazing. It is amazing.
You know, isn't it
fun?
It's been amazing at Citizens Bank Park, and isn't it something just to look back in time, and not even that far back in time? 4 weeks when you guys were here, 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and think about how everything that you thought you knew turned out to be so off base. Wouldn't be the first time for me, but for you guys. So the Phillies are going to the World Series to play the Astros, just as we all expected. We can see now how this could have happened, but how do you think it actually happened? Tom, let's start with you.
Rob Thompson talked about them getting into the postseason, the stress that the team felt. And I mean, I think we all felt it. We were watching them lose that first game of the day-night doubleheader in Houston, and we're thinking, after losing 3 to Chicago at Wrigley, we're thinking, this ain't going to go well. But he said that once they got in, he said, he's just relaxed them a little bit. Maybe. I also think that the matchups were somewhat fortuitous. I mean, the Cardinal matchup, I felt they were better than the Cardinals going into that series, even though the games were in St. Louis. That helped them. The Padres knocked off the Mets. That obviously helped too. Padres knocked off the Dodgers. That helped too. I mean, things really fell in line, but they definitely are playing, I think, more relaxed. I think that's part of it. And I think that their big guy is playing like their big guy. And he wasn't at the end of the year. I mean, that's been, I think, a huge part of this whole thing.
I noticed.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I can promise you it's not false bravado or anything from Rob Thompson. He told me that specifically in his office in that last week of the season. And he said, if we can just get in, I think these guys are going to be all right. And, he has said it a number of times publicly since, but he really did believe that going into it, that the thing was getting in. It was putting away the 11 years of and even in particular, the last 4 years of missed opportunities when every September they went into the month with a chance to make the playoffs. And the big guy has been the big guy. There's no doubt about it, but they have played in the playoffs like they were designed to play.
That's right.
This is the team they built. It was a team. It's a team that has shown its defensive flaws in the postseason. It is a team that has ridden 2 really good starters in the postseason. And it's a team that has ridden 2 or 3 really good relievers. And they've kind of filled in some of the gaps. Have they gotten some breaks? Perhaps. The Cardinals matchup, maybe that's a really good first round matchup for them. I mean, if they're the 5th seed and they face the Mets in the first round, I don't know. Who knows? Would they be here? I don't know. There's no way to go back and do it differently, but to me, they're playing like they were designed to play.
Yeah, you guys actually have missed the key thing here. It's not that they didn't have to play the Dodgers or the Mets. It's that they didn't have to play the Cubs.
Or the Rangers.
I know, right? We joke. It's funny. We were looking at this yesterday. This is the team they were built to be. That's what you just said, right? Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, this team has played together more games in the postseason than the actual season. Am I right? I'm almost sure that's right. Think about it.
It could be.
That may be right.
That's your department, Jason.
Totally. You're wild and wacky.
We're just here to pluck it off your tree. Out there.
Right, I'll get back to you. I was too tired to look it up. Doug, what have you seen? You were there for the whole ride.
Man, it was truly amazing. But I think it started the tone that Rob Thompson set. And I think that, I remember Zach Wheeler, doing the interviews, the presser before they started the series in San Diego. And Wheeler focused a lot on Bryce Harper and saying he's the man. So then when the man came in Harper, he said, Rob Thompson is our oak, right? He referenced what it was, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp and all. But he said he's our oak. And, we definitely asked Rob about that. But there is something to say about his experience, his calm. But he's not that experienced, calm guy that's like rolling his eyes at young players. He really embraces them as, part of the team and how they inspire players, with their energy and their hope and their optimism and their just enthusiasm of being there. And
their wackiness.
And their wackiness, right? Yeah. And Marsh coming over and, all the hair stuff and his great defense. I think it sort of fit pretty well. And you have to have a good manager that knows how to not only develop players in a way, even at the major league level, to prepare them for this moment, but they also have to know how to kind of integrate players, right? How do you bring in guys that are traded and young guys coming up and all the moves that they had to make? And but I thought Scott, made a great point about they were built for this, and they truly were. And the thing I would add to what Scott listed is home runs. The home run is king in the postseason. And even the 1-0 game we did, we did 2 games in Cleveland, 2-1 and 1-0, and it was all home runs. So, and then the 10-6 game in the Padres Phillies game was another example of Rhys Hoskins show, right? So, so I think it was a lot to see how they came together and really played the game that leads to a lot of success in the postseason. And when you have a star like Harper who rose to the occasion of all the big hits, and you have frontline starters for 2 games at least, and Suarez is tough too. They look great, and the Padres just seemed like they were 1 move late on things, and Thompson always felt like a move early, because you could tell that Bob Melvin was trying to get his pitchers through something because he was worried about extending the bullpen. He knew he felt good about Suarez and Hader, but he, and maybe Garcia, but it was like that 5th, 6th inning. So it was like, get far. And he would go that 1 extra batter. Mm-hmm. And it might've been Bryce and Stott who hit the double, or Max Muncy hit the home run and so on. But it was really interesting to see those different managerial styles. And Thompson was just, really amazing.
Okay. Let me jump in here. Yeah. I do want to spend some time like just digesting more about how we got here. But first, I need to hear something. It's one of the all-time iconic postseason home runs, certainly in the history of the Phillies, but actually documented this in my column Sunday night, in all of postseason history. I want to hear Scott Franzke calling Bryce Harper's home run on Sunday afternoon.
2 balls, 2 strikes to Bryce Harper. Suarez delivers. Swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's going, yes! And it is gone. Yes! Yes! It is bedlam at the bank as Bryce Harper has put the Phillies on top. Are you kidding me? Oh, his 10th career home run in the postseason, and he may never hit a bigger one.
It is bedlam at the bank.
Oh man, that's a t-shirt. That's a t-shirt. It's a mug. It's a hat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you got it. You need to make those all up and give them to everyone you know, Scott.
Great.
Hey, listen, just tell me about that call.
I don't know. I mean, it's just it's say what you see, right? You try not to come completely unhinged. I'm not sure I did that, but I don't know. For me, it's just I'm really fortunate to get to be a part of something like that, and really fortunate to. I mean, I've seen some really cool things, and I love this game, and I love this team, and I love this franchise, and for me to be connected to that, that's really, really cool.
Really cool. And Doug and I talk about this a lot now that he's also on these calls for ESPN radio. And it's about how it isn't just the home run that becomes the memory. It's the call of the home run. How much do you think about that these words that come out of your mouth are going to resonate through the ages?
Well, I don't know. The one I've always gotten asked about more than any other was Jimmy Rollins hitting the double against Broxton in the 09 LCS. And people always say to me, well, what a great call. I'm like, well, Jimmy did all the hard work, you know? And it's the same thing with yesterday with Bryce. I mean, he pulled off the real magic. And, you know, these things are singular moments, right? And if you're there in the ballpark and you watch it, you saw it a certain way and you might remember it that way. But for a lot of us who, you know, there's only 45,000 seats. And so there's a lot of people that had to experience it a different way. And so, and I think we all want to experience it over again. Like he's never going to hit that home run for the first time again. It's a one-shot deal. So I think people, you know, maybe latch on to the call or you know, or replay, you know, some video angle replay. I mean, I know they've had a bunch of those. And I think we all just want to relive it again and again. So I guess in some ways we're the beneficiary of that because, you know, yeah, I'm sure people will tell me, you know, years from now, because they do about J-Roll, and I'm sure they'll do it about this.
Yeah, no kidding. I'll tell you the coolest thing that I dug up. There have been 5 other home runs in postseason history that put a team into the lead that late in the game when they were trailing. But there had never been one hit the inning after that team blew the lead that was going to clinch the series, right? This was in only clinching games. So there'd never been that homer.
Wow.
Isn't it incredible to think about?
That is incredible. I mean, in the history of this game and considering all the home runs, was yesterday the anniversary of the Joe Carter one too? I mean, was that the same day that Carter hit the home run to win the World Series in '93?
I think you're right. Whoa.
Well,
and that was on the list.
That was on the list. Yeah, that was on the list. You know,
Yeah.
It's remarkable sometimes where we pull out. I mean, we've been talking. I mean, Scott and I have been talking on the radio in different points where, you know, Harper is this, Hoskins is this, and you're bringing out, you know, Sarge and Mike Schmidt and Jimmy Rollins and Jason Worth. I mean, that's also, I think, really cool is that we're giving everybody a history lesson of the Philadelphia Phillies postseason in this postseason because it's been this special. I mean, it's just, that's awesome.
Yeah, so true. And Tom, I got to ask you about this. You know, we think about it every October. It just stinks that the home team's TV announcers don't get to do this time of year.
Well,
we all understand why it is, but you can admit it. You're jealous of your friend Franzke right now.
I'm jealous of Scott, of Joe Davis, of Oscar, and Bill Kulick on Spanish, and you know, yeah. It's what we signed up for, and I'm grateful that I get to do 2 innings of radio. I mean, I beyond grateful that I get to do 2 innings of radio. I mean, it's just amazing to be part of it. I love the fact that I get to do pregame stuff. I mean, postgame stuff too, being on the field yesterday. But you know, it is. I'll admit it. I was envious of Scott's call, which was wonderful. Joe Davis's call was fantastic. I wanted to be part of the mechanism that was on the TV, because those guys did an amazing job of capturing the crowd too in their way. I mean, you know, Pete Macheska, the producer, I mean, those guys, they were really good. So yeah, I am envious, but appreciative also that I get to be part of it. Just to be part of it. I mean, I always tell people that when it comes to the postseason, I'll do whatever I can to help. I'll do whatever I can to help. And that's the Hoskins home run. You know, the place just is unbelievable to watch when things like that happen. I mean, just all of it. And the same with the Harper one. Scott's right. There's all these different angles. It's so cool to watch them. So yeah. I am beyond envious. Beyond envy.
I'm beyond grateful that I mean, I don't know if our shop is any different than most, but we have such a good crew and we are all such good friends that for us, I know this is a really cool thing to experience with our best friends.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's Larry or Tom or Greg Murphy, who does our pre and post. The engineers who work in the booth with us. We're our own little family for 6 months out of the year, and just we're having the best time. It's awesome. It's great to be a part of.
And I think about it too with Scott's home run. I can picture Larry bouncing in his seat, like laughing.
Is that what he was doing?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's what he does. And then he looks down, he marks like I envisioned it all. And he's marking his book because his book has to be perfect. I mean, it's just funny. It's just fun.
Well, as you know, guys, we all have like a Philly history. I mean, I grew up a Phillies fan, and I learned about Jason's columns when I was in college in Philadelphia. And so it's a long history, and I think certainly I'd never been on the field for them clinching, but talking to Bryce Harper before the game, he was kicked back with his suit and sneakers, and he was laying back in his chair, and I knew about how he has a lot of respect for legacy and how he has figured out a way to connect that. And maybe, a lot of people may not know like how deep he is involved in that. And I know when I learned it for the first time was years ago when he was with the Nats, Dusty Baker was sharing this. And it was so fascinating to think of the 19-year-old who had an edge to him became this real, ambassador in a lot of ways. So I'm curious about your experience, seeing Harper kind of for the first time on that stage, but also as he's, become part of this Philly culture, who you see him as now versus what you kind of perceived before he got there.
Well, that's a good question. I didn't really, from a distance, like him, didn't really know him. I had one interaction with him and he was great, but he was on the Nationals. So we didn't like the Nationals. they took Jason Worth from us. So, but I don't know. I've enjoyed having him around. I really have. I enjoy interacting with him. His parents are awesome people too. They raised him right. And, the media guy this year has Bryce on it with the tuxedo and the MVP trophy and stuff like that. And he had a pretty good hand in that because he knew that Mike Schmidt had the same cover years ago. And, the people that came up with that idea, he was headlong into it when they came up with it because he's so appreciative of the history of the game. He came on with us for 5 or 6 innings earlier this year, and the stuff he was bringing up, he knows the game, he knows everything about it. So,
yeah, Scott.
Yeah, I think he's put a lot of effort into making sure that he's. He doesn't want to. He's not a guy who wants to be caught unawares. He doesn't want to be that guy that somebody says, some reporter, I don't know, maybe a guy who writes columns with really crazy stats in it, to come up to him and say, hey, you're the first. I'm just, just throwing something out there.
Yeah. This would never happen in actual life.
Yeah. But I don't think he wants to have a reporter come up to him and say, hey, you're the first guy since ... to do this for the Phillies. He wants to know who that ... is.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to not know that. And I think he's put effort into making sure that he's aware of those things, and he's aware of the history, and he's aware of the city, and he's aware of the people in this town. And I just think, he committed to be here for 13 years. And he committed 100%. I think that's pretty obvious. In that kind of a story you're talking about, Doug, is that matters to him. I think the history of the game matters to him, but I think the history of the Phillies matters a great deal to him.
I wrote a column after that game Sunday asking about all the what ifs, and how the stars line up for this team. And they needed to line up for that home run to mean anything. But I keep thinking about the Bryce Harper what if. What if Bryce had signed somewhere else? Why do you think the player was such a perfect fit for the town and the team? Tom?
Well, that's a great question. What if he would have signed somewhere else? Because Manny signed, right? Manny signed before him, didn't he, with San Diego?
Yep.
Yeah, Manny signed. I was in spring training in Arizona. Manny signed the last day I was in Arizona, and then Bryce signed the first day I was in Florida.
Right.
So that worked out well for me, at least.
Yeah. So that to me, like, where do you go from there? I didn't I didn't know how he would fit into the city, honestly, until he got here and I met him that first day and talked to him and kind of understood what that his father was, a blue collar guy, even though you don't realize it. But he embraced the whole thing. I saw him interact with the Fanatic the first time. I mean, and like he knew everything about the Fanatic, like everything about the Fanatic. It was really funny. So I think he fits perfectly into the city. And I think it's because he's embraced what the city is and the fabric of the city and the energy of the city. And, I just think a lot of guys, when they come in, they're like, what is going on here? This is different. I don't know if I like a roast pork sandwich or not. I mean, I don't know which cheesesteak I like better, but he's like just jumped into everything. He's jumped into everything about the city.
Yeah, so true. I want to talk about some of these other what ifs too. Scott, you're a perfect one to ask this one because you do the Rob Thompson show every night. What if they hadn't changed managers? Does this happen?
I have to believe that this game is won and lost by the players, but I have to believe that Rob had a great deal to do with, I don't want to say the culture in the clubhouse. I think that would be the wrong word. I think it's more just sort of the demeanor of the clubhouse, like the tension level. And I'm not suggesting anything negative with regard to Joe, because I like Joe a lot, and I learned a lot from chatting with Joe daily. And but I think Joe was under an extreme amount of pressure, and I don't think it was pressure that Rob Thompson ever needed to feel. And I think that allowed everybody to also play with less pressure. Their schedule got easier, there's no doubt, and they got to winning in June. But I think to suggest that they would be here if they hadn't have made the change I think that would probably not be the case. I think they needed to make that change in order to get to this point.
Yeah, I think that was perfectly said. Doug, you have a what if?
Well, I'm curious about leading into the moment. What if Josh Hader was pitching for the Padres? That's my what if.
Good one.
Yeah, but that's a great one.
It sure is.
And we said it. I'm sure you guys said it on your broadcast, Doug, but we said it on ours. If Josh Hader is warming up now, who's he warming up for? If it's not Bryce Harper.
Amen.
Like it to me, it makes no sense. No sense at all. And there's nobody behind Harper that you're saving Hader for. And we saw Rob Thompson go all in on Sir Anthony Dominguez 2 nights before, going for 6-out save. He didn't want it to be that way. He wanted Alvarado to get more outs, but that moment he needed it, and that's what he rolled the dice with. And from our standpoint, we look at it from our perspective. Bob Melvin knows his team way better than I ever do or would. And he knows what he's doing. But just for me, it's if he's warming up there, I mean, he was warm. He was ready. They had the delay to put a drying agent down. He was plenty warm, plenty ready to go. But if not for Harper, then for who?
Yeah.
Well, we'll be wondering about that forever, and so will everybody in San Diego.
Yeah.
Here's one that really blows me away. What if they hadn't changed the rules this year? What if there weren't an extra wild card team in the playoffs? What if there were no DH in the National League? Think about that. They changed those 2 rules this year. Tom, how did that work out for the Phillies?
Well, I mean, listen, Harper would be out of his sling at this point. Like he'd have rotation in his elbow because he would have had surgery. I mean, almost immediately, you would think, right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have played the outfield. I know one thing, that if they didn't have the extra wild card, I wouldn't have been tied in knots on Saturday at my son's wedding. My son's wedding.
We're definitely gonna talk about that.
But the extra wild card. It doesn't even cross my mind anymore that they wouldn't have been in if they didn't have the extra wild card. Like I'm like, it's almost as if it's been there for years. I think the Harper thing, the DH thing, is really, really interesting because they wouldn't have signed Castellanos probably because they didn't.
I talked to Dave about that after the game. He said the whole construction of our team would have been different. Can't sign both those guys, Castellanos and Schwarber. Wouldn't have happened.
Right, you would have had Matt Vierling playing right field, and that would have been fine. But you know what I'm saying? He would.
Somebody would have. Yes, I mean somebody would have. Somebody would have. But that's exactly right. I keep thinking about it. The stars lined up. Every single star that had to line up. I was talking to one of the Padres guys, and he said, "All right, when that Nick Castellanos single on Saturday bounced up the middle, past the pitcher, and then hit the bag and carry him past Jake Cronenworth, we said something is happening."
Angels in the outfield, man. Angels in the outfield.
I know, right? All right, you touched on this. There's a Tom McCarthy story we have to tell. Tom missed game 4 of the NLCS on Saturday. Why was that again, Tom?
My older son, Patrick, who is also a broadcaster and should know better. No, I'm just saying. His wedding was Saturday. So, that was, I didn't put it on my plate. I told Scott this last week. I said, I'm not going to worry about it until I have to worry about it. And then we won. And I was like, okay, now I have to worry about it.
Well, your son, by the way, has the same anniversary as I did. So I did the same thing. And I think Jimmy Rollins couldn't come and Lieberthal. And
well, I have to say, I mean, Scott, I know Scott feels this way too. I mean, we're really fortunate because, I mean, my wife has followed me in this business for 30 years. And I know Scott the same way with Lori. You just, when it came out, I said, well, what about the rehearsal? And she goes, "You are not missing Friday night's game." And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "You're not missing Friday night's game." And Patrick was like, "Daddy, you're not missing Friday night's game also." So I did the rehearsal dinner. Did the rehearsal dinner, did the toast, got in the car at 6:15 in Yardley, Pennsylvania. And I don't know how this was, but I pulled into the garage at Citizens Bank Park at 7:07. And I'm like, I didn't hit any traffic. I mean, Waze hadn't going on. I swear.
It took me an hour and a half to get to the park that day, and I live right near there, as you know.
You're all tailgating.
Your Waze app was not as good as my Waze app.
No, you couldn't do it anyway. But so just to clear this up, even your son, who broadcast for the Phillies, didn't think the Phillies were going to be playing in the NLCS this weekend.
But to his defense, 2 years ago when they did this, there was no lockout season. There was no wild card to extend the season. There was only the 1-game playoff for the wild card. So this would have been, I think that, and I don't know if this is trying to go back and look at it, but what he was saying, I believe somebody was saying that it would have been an off day in the World Series on Saturday. So I tend to believe that.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
No, I share the same October 22nd. So that
it was a great day, though.
I did the same thing. I was a minor league announcer when I got married. We got married in October because the season ended September 1st or whatever it was. So for us, it was like, all right, we'll give ourselves 4 or 5 weeks to get ready, and then we'll do it in early October or whatever. So we spent our anniversary. I was leaving St. Louis to go to Atlanta. She was leaving St. Louis to come back to Philly with the kids. So, we've had to spend a few anniversaries dealing with the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, but Meg has made sure she's to tell everybody else there are no weddings from March until October.
So at least you got that straight.
There's some cushion. We have to have a little 2-week cushion to.
Exactly.
Life is about learning from your experiences.
That's exactly right.
So what's it been like in the city itself? Just walking around and just can you feel it in the air? I mean, I remember the doorman at the hotel we stayed at. I mean, we talked for like an hour over the 3 days, just talking Phillies, and he was so fired up. So curious about any experiences in town you've had.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I feel like we've been on the road so much.
Amen.
We had that long stretch on the road right before the playoffs, and we've been on the road so much. We went to St. Louis. We never even came home. We went to St. Louis, then went to Atlanta. It was like we weren't here to experience the city through one whole round of this. So that's been interesting. For me, I don't live in Center City. I live outside the city, but you do notice that everybody is talking about it. I mean, you go get coffee at the Wawa, or you get the email from your kid's teacher, and it's all, hey, kids are wearing red today, or whatever. I mean, it's everybody's invested, and I think that's I was waiting actually online to do an interview earlier this morning, and just seeing the shots of the city. And there's something I love about Philadelphia, that everybody who's watching a Flyers game at the Wells Fargo Center, they're still paying attention to the Phillies.
Yeah.
And they're still celebrating like they're at the Phillies game.
Yeah.
Even though they're at a different game in a different venue. It's that, the connection citywide, that everybody's, whether you're driving down the street and the bus says "Go Phillies" on it, on the little, instead of where it's going, it says "Go Phillies." I just love it. I love that about this city.
And I thought, I'm sorry, Jay, but I thought, like, when the Phillies clinched the last one, when the Eagles were in Arizona, and like the whole, wherever they were, I mean, there was thousands of Eagles fans, and they were all watching the Phillies game, and they watched the clinching, and they all just erupted at the same time. I mean, it travels. It travels.
And then there's the electricity at the yard. It's funny. Last time you were here, we were talking about how these fans were handling the torture of watching their team try to get into that tournament at all. Now every game, it's 2008 again.
Yeah.
What just happened out there at that park the last 2 weekends, Scott?
Yeah.
I mean, 11 years of waiting, 11 years of pent-up frustration, of disappointment, or whatever you want to call it. They've been just dying to do that again. And I mean, I think, the Philly fans very much pride themselves on the idea that they can have an outcome on things. And I can't put it past them that they had an effect on the outcome. Whether it was, I'm not saying they intimidate the other club, but I know they fire up their club.
Yeah.
I know those players love it, and they feed off it. And, obviously you have to, whatever energy you're pulling from, you have to be able to stay in the moment and still worry about your at bat, or whatever it is you're doing, making the pitch you got to make. It really has been unbelievable. Joe Davis told Tom and I, said, this is one of the best atmospheres I've ever been around for any event, any sport, any event. And I think he was, I saw him Sunday morning, we were getting coffee in the lunchroom at the same time. And he said, I'm just loving your fans. I'm just loving this place. It's great.
That was another one of my what ifs, Scott. What if the Phillies don't beat the Cardinals and never play a postseason game in Philadelphia this month? If that happens, this season was really barely a blip on Philadelphia's sports radar.
Right.
Instead,
I had to spend all kinds of money to get my kid to a road playoff game, because I promised him. I promised him for years, the last 5 years. I'm like, yes, if the Phillies get to the playoffs, you'll get to go. Little did I know they would choose to go in the year that there could potentially not be a home game.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I guess we better get them on the road and get them out to St. Louis.
Let's go see the Arch.
Yeah. Let's go.
Well, that's not all he's gotten to see. It just has a special connection now between fan base and team that might easily never have happened.
That's a good point.
It's so special. All right, one more thing, because I know you got to go. We probably should mention there's a World Series coming up where the Phillies are playing a team that hasn't lost a game yet in the postseason. I don't know that anybody not from Philadelphia is going to pick the Phillies to win, but I don't know. What do you guys think? These teams just played each other last series of the season. It definitely had World Series preview written all over it.
Well, if it did, then we're in trouble. But think about that too. If Nola doesn't pitch that gem on the first game, Phillies wouldn't have been in the postseason because they didn't look good on Tuesday and Wednesday. They hung over on Tuesday, so that was part of it.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that? I mean, they're a really good team. Like their pitching I was so impressed with their pitching in that series. I don't know how you felt, Scott, but I was really impressed with their pitching in that series. And I was really impressed with Alvarez. That man is a monster.
Yeah, he's a beast. He is a beast. But Harper's a beast right now too. So I am not going to put it past them. I think that, this first 2 games in Houston, I think it comes down to the same formula we started this, talking about here today. And that's if they play like they were designed to play, like they were built, with, 2 really good starters, it's the same thing. It's going to line up the same way. You're going to get 4 of the first 6 games with Wheeler and Nola, and I know they'll take their chances with that. There's an extra off day in there, so maybe you can even ride those relief farms a little bit more if you need to. But this team was designed to hit. This team was designed to hit, to overcome the pitching shortcomings. And if they can hit, and again, they may not have to hit a lot because pitching, and they may not hit a lot. But if they get good starting pitching and, you get a couple of big hits along the way, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, Rhys Hoskins had 4 hits in that series. They just all happen to be home. They happen to be huge. I mean, 3 of the 4 of them were huge. So who knows? Maybe the formula is there for him.
And the other thing too, Harper's. I mean, he is hitting opposite field home runs, so those Crawford boxes are looking enticing.
Oh, very
That's
much.
a good point. I've been talking to all these scouts who've been following the Phillies this month, and just to advance the next series. And the one thing that they have said to me over and over is, this team is dangerous because it hits good pitching.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it takes this time of year. Again, I picked them to lose every round, so you shouldn't even be asking.
Well, go ahead and pick them to lose.
Pick them again to lose. Yeah,
this is why I don't gamble. This is why I don't gamble. One quick question. I'm curious. All right, Harper clearly MVP of the playoffs, but before that, who is your team MVP going into the postseason? If you would pick it's a tough one. But
I would probably go JT.
JT Realmuto.
Yeah. I mean, you can pick across the board. I would go JT.
I'll take a little different tact at that. I mean, I would say JT. If JT doesn't turn his season around the way he did, they're not here.
No doubt.
But for what he did on the field and for what he did in the clubhouse, Kyle Schwarber has been irreplaceable. Mm-hmm. What he's meant to the chemistry, and you talk to those players, and they might not divulge everything, but you talk to those players, and that Kyle Schwarber is the touchstone for them all.
Yeah,
he's the one that makes that a team, and I've seen enough baseball in my life, and I'm certainly not an ex-player and haven't lived the life in the clubhouse, but if you tell me clubhouse chemistry doesn't matter, I'd say boo. I think Kyle Schwarber has meant a great deal to the team in what he's been able to do to help bring out the best in everybody.
Plus, he's hit really cool home runs too.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, by the way, he led the league in homers. But you're right. People really do gravitate to that guy. You just see it. I always tell the story about, there was a game in May. You guys might remember this. It was like a disputed trap catch call against the Braves in right field. He was on second. He tagged and went to third. And the umpires, I don't know if they didn't see him or they couldn't tell what it was, but they called triple play, I think, if I remember right. And he just stood there on third base and held up his arms, told the Braves, stay right where you are.
Yeah.
Not leaving this field. Told the umpires, you guys are going to overturn this.
He did that yesterday.
He did, right?
Yesterday.
But I noticed, the thing that I noticed about that moment was there were 7 Braves standing around third base, just hanging out with that guy.
I do remember that. Yeah.
In the middle of a game while they were doing a replay review.
Yeah.
It just tells you a little bit about him. Look, I know you guys have to run. Scott, Tom, you are the best. Keep up the amazing work. If the Phillies win the World Series, I think we might need to drag you back to Starkville one more time. It's becoming a tradition like no other.
Love it.
Thanks, my friends.